stupid, scary movie.
Be afraid. Be very afraid.
I see dead people.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Here's Johnny.
The power of Christ compels you! The power of Christ compels you!
Whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
Welcome to Talking Horror with Jamie and Nikisha.
Hi, I'm Jamie.
And I'm Nikisha, and this is Talking Horror with Jamie.
And Nikisha.
Where we share our love for spooky things and talk horror through the lens of human behavior. Welcome, everyone.
Welcome.
Pew, 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 pew. And so this week we are starting our series, I would say a series of sorts, of Robert Edgar's movies. And we are starting off with the 2015 period supernatural horror film, The Witch. Yes, that's my witch sound. I think Jamie and I were on the same page there. Yes.
Scratchy! What's happening?
Thomason, take the children outside.
What does this today? What does this? His mouth is sealed up. Oh, God. Will you?
Hold it. Children, away from this. Thomason, now.
So, of course, this movie is written and directed by Robert Edgars in his featured directorial debut, which I did not know that. It stars Anya Taylor-Joy, and this is her first film. And wow, just what an actress she has become from this. Loved her in Queen's Gambit. She's just a phenomenal actress. So this is really awesome that this is where she got her start. The movie also stars Ralph Ineson, Kate Dickie, Harvey Scrimshaw, Ellie Granger. I just have to say it that way because Granger. And Lucas Dawson. So obviously, heavy spoilers ahead. We will be talking about everything VVH. And are there any trigger warnings?
I was literally watching Brian, the gears in Brian's head turn, and then he just got so happy.
VVH.
It sounds like you're going to say va-va boom, but you go the va-va witch. The va-va itch.
Oh, fantastic. Jamie, any trigger warnings that we should be aware of as we dive into this movie?
Yeah, there's violent imagery. There is infanticide. There is nudity. There are, satanic images and references, witchcraft. Mm-hmm. This is a very VVH-y movie, very very witchy vibes.
Yes.
So and there's also like a lot of like heavy religious overtones, Puritan, all that jazz.
Yes.
So if any of that is unsettling, and I think also there's an image of, there's many images actually of animals being slaughtered. Mm-hmm. So all of the above, if that is not for you, you can pass on this one. There's plenty more A24 wildness out there for you.
Yes, or bewitching behaviors for you to enjoy that is not this particular movie. So with that said, we need to get into what this movie is even about. I mean, of course, is a witch, but is she a good witch or an evil witch?
Are you a good witch or a bad witch?
Will we ever know? Jamie is going to be the one to tell us in our 2-minute plot summary.
What a hard one to do, even though we just watched it. Okay.
What's the plot?
Yeah, I watched it today as well, and we will get into all the discussion.
I have the timer up. You have 2 minutes to explain the plot of the Vava Itch.
You got this.
And go.
Okay, so the movie starts in 1630s New England. A family is being banished from this Puritan colony over religious stuff. So they do their own thing. One day, the main oldest daughter, Thomason, is playing with her infant brother, and the baby disappears. A witch took the baby, slaughters it, and uses it, rubs the blood all over her body, and dances around or whatever. The mom is like so overwhelmed. She's crying all the time. The father and the oldest son go out hunting because like they don't have enough food and stuff because they left the colony. He reveals that he took the wife's prized cup and sold it for money. And then there's just a lot of people not really talking directly to each other. There's a rabbit in the woods. They chase after it. Then the dog is disemboweled. Then
1 minute.
God. Another time, Thomason and her brother go into the woods and she gets knocked out and he runs into this sexy lady, but it's the witch. Then everyone tries to find him. Then he comes back and he's like in a tizzy. The two little twins are really awful and just being annoying and they're terrible and they're like, Black Phillip, and playing around, but they're playing around to accuse Thomason of being a witch. The oldest son dies. Everyone's dying. Thomason gets locked in a thing. And everything dies. And then her dad dies. And then her mom is accusing her of doing this. And then she defends herself. The mom dies. I forget what happens to the twins. And then Black Phillip is actually talking to her. And then she decides that she wants to sign her name in the book and becomes a witch.
Yes.
And
yes.
That's it. Right on time.
Woo!
You got it. Great job.
Yeah,
Snaps for Jamie.
And that's the plot.
VVH. Yes. So it was a lot and nothing all at the same time. So let's start off with likes and gripes.
And now our likes and gripes.
And I'm going to ask Brian to go first. I would love your likes and gripes on this particular A24 movie.
Oh, wow. I'm so honored, Nikisha. I never go first. This is my second time seeing this movie. Mm-hmm. I liked it the first time. I loved it this time. This time was so much better than the first time. For many reasons. I think knowing the, quote, plot of this movie enhances the viewing. There were a lot of things that I noticed this time about the filmmaking as well as the storytelling. And this is going to sound stupid, but the first time you watch this movie, you're figuring out what's happening, the plot. The second time you're watching the movie, you're trying to figure out what's happening, everything else. And I enjoy that type of a watch a little bit more. You know, I think something that the movie does really well is, first of all, tone. It just keeps building tension. It's super creepy. Even though you see the witch right up front, the movie is not about, is there actually a witch in the woods? Like, the baby gets taken, and then, like, we see the witch, like, bathing in the baby's blood to, like, make herself young and fly. We know that there is a witch out there because no family members are with the witch, just, you know, in terms of like living family members, I'll say. So therefore, It's not like we're getting a false narrative. We are actually seeing the witch because it's not through the eyes of anybody else. It's not Thomason, and we're not questioning if she's crazy or not. Like, we know there's a witch out there. So the rest of the movie is kind of like, what is the witch? What is not? Is somebody working with the witch? Like how is this affecting the family? And that's a very interesting thing to watch, as opposed to like, will they, won't they? Like, is it a witch? Is it not a witch? I really enjoyed that. And then you get a little, you know, then I think halfway through you're questioning, like, are the twins in on it? Like, is the goat actually like talking to them? Like, and then obviously all that is revealed at the end. Also, the twins are my least favorite character, and almost the twins rival the awful boyfriends in the Paranormal Activity movies as my least favorite character.
That's a hot take.
A hot take. I hate those twins. I have many. We'll get into this. I have a lot of questions for the two of you in terms of like what you just thought, like about things, because I have a theory, and I read online that some other people have this theory as well. So I want to explore that theory with you after I hear what yours is. But I think this movie is well acted. It's gorgeous. You have to watch it with subtitles,
Yes.
which is super helpful. I think that it is absolutely a triumph of a movie. But I totally 100% understand why people do not like this movie, find it boring, can't get into it. I get that 100%. I would never get angry of someone not liking this movie because I get it. I just happen to really like this movie, and I'm super pumped to talk about it with you too. I don't know if I have any gripes aside from I just have a hard time figuring it out, but it's a puzzle to me. So that's not necessarily a gripe; it's a challenge.
And you like puzzles?
I love puzzles. But yeah, that's. I'll stop there. Maybe I'll come up with some gripes as we talk through it. I think I would have liked, again, context. I think I would have liked a little bit more context as to why they got kicked out. Because I think that would inform a little bit of the dad's perspective of things. But I have notes about that. They say he gets kicked out for I wrote it down. Let me find my notes, but I'll let someone else go. Sorry. I'll stop there.
Okay. Yeah. Jamie, I would love to hear your opinion. And I'm wanting to hear you guys' opinion first before I say my own, because this is one of those movies where I would love to talk through it because there were some things that I might have just missed.
Sure.
So, Jamie, could you share your likes and gripes of this movie, please?
Yeah. So I will admit that upon first viewing, I did not get very far into this movie and I gave up. So this time is my third, but really my second, or 2.3.
Yes.
Because I got to the part where the witch had the baby and then cut to her rubbing juices all over her body and then kind of floating towards the moon, and I just paused it and I was like, I have no idea what's going on, and I at this point I do not care to know. And I recognize that I'm the kind of person that needs to be in the right mood to watch certain things, and to have to for the tone of the movie to match where I'm at mentally, and I just don't think I was ready to start this movie at that time. And so I gave it another shot and I got through it, and I definitely thought it was interesting. And then, but as other people will call me out for, they will say that when I call something interesting, I'm using that negatively. And no, I'm not saying it, to be negative. I'm just saying I didn't really know what opinion to form of it upon finishing it. This time around, having already seen it and knowing what happens, I feel I also had way more of an appreciation for it, because I wasn't painstakingly tried to keep up with the plot.
Right.
I know what the general plot is. Now I'm trying to focus more on what are they trying to say? What are the things that I missed the first time around? Again, yes, double subtitles. It's so important, because just the way that they are communicating, it's really hard to follow. And so I felt I didn't have to put so much more effort into trying to understand what they were saying, because I could read it. And because I knew what the plot was. So all of that being said, as I'm sure we will definitely get into other A24 movies, as we already have with Midsommar and Hereditary, the way in which they're able to convey this tension and the frustration around Thomason's not lying, she's telling the truth, and then you have these twins who are undermining her, but the mom is already racked with guilt that she's not able to really see reality at that point. And so she's willing to believe anything, including the fact that her oldest might be belonging to witchcraft. So I I like the tension building. It's really frustrating, but like still very engaging to see like at what point like will they believe
Right.
her, and like they don't, and like it leads to their demise, and that's really interesting. And then ultimately like that in turn leads her to joining it at the end. So it's like all of this effort into trying to like prove herself and you know like what is the word, vindicate herself, and show that like she really isn't a witch. Like she just ends up signing her name in, I guess, Satan's book is who we have to
Satan's
assume.
guest book.
I just think
Oh my God.
yeah,
Yes.
just staying in the hotel
Oh
666.
shit. That's an escape room right there. Yes. Yeah, that's
But, yeah.
it's interesting because I also am watching this for the second time. And I just remember watching it the first time around. I want to say it had to have been maybe just a year after it was released. I was still in college. I know that and this movie came out in 2015 when I watched it. And I remember the first time thinking, I guess like most people, what is happening? I'm just trying to follow what's happening. And even watching it this second time, there were only certain parts that I remembered. And there were some parts where I was questioning, did I really watch this movie?
Sure. Well, the first time you watched The Witch, this time you watched The Itch.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, totally.
It's a whole different concept.
Agreed.
And yeah, I really put in my notes, I don't know what it is about this movie, and I hate that I cannot articulate exactly what my gripe is with this movie, but it just was something, even watching it the second time, that I could not get into. Things that I will say that I liked and I appreciated: the acting. I will echo you, Brian, in that respect. And the cinematography was beautiful. And I love the idea, I love a little Salem witch trial moment. That is my jam. And I'm interested in stuff like that. And like we've discussed in the past, Jacob's Ladder stuff, kind of army movies aren't my thing. And I think Jamie kind of echoed that same sentiment. But this movie I was ready to be into. I was here for what it was about. Maybe it was because it's kind of a slow burn in a way, but not, because like you said, Brian, you do see the witch. There isn't a question of, is she a witch? Is she not? We know that it's out there. And so now it's just a matter of a family dynamic. But I don't know. I guess we should just kind of talk through the family dynamic in that regard, because for me, there was just something that was missing. What is this movie trying to say? And I guess I could look at other people's opinions and pieces on it, but I guess I would just like you guys' opinions on what do you think this movie is trying to say before we get into more of the human behavior aspect of it, because that is something to be discussed. And we'll get into kind of, mob mentality of accusations with witches and how we kind of how our beliefs and our families kind of affect our mentality and what we will choose to believe. And then what, Thomason ultimately decided that she was going to go away from that belief completely, because she also just didn't have anybody left to answer to. So she could do whatever the hell she wanted. And she had that freedom to not be under the thumb of her family. But I guess my initial question before we get into all of the human behavior stuff is, what do you think this movie is trying to say? What is this movie about? Because it's not just another who's the witch type situation, if that makes sense. Opinions, thoughts.
Yeah, Jamie, what do you think?
Oh, God. I mean, again, I think this is one of those movies where like it takes me a while, kind of similar to what you were saying, Nikisha, of like it takes me a while to digest, and I think I need to like do research to pull what meaning other people have kind of taken away from it, and like kind of see like, does this land with me, or like, is this not what I picked up on at all, and like this feels like a stretch, and it's just not, this doesn't feel like what they were trying to do. So like outside of like witchiness, I mean,
yeah,
I think there's a lot of references to sin
Yeah.
and I mean, even Thomason,
Oh, okay.
because like, trying to get as in your face with it as
Right.
possible. I think with like, okay, so we have the oldest son, Caleb,
Mhm.
Mhm.
I think is his name, who like a few times we see him kind of like eyeing his sister in like a
Yeah.
sexualizing way. And so I think they're like alluding to lust because again, that's like how he dies essentially. Like he gets caught by the witch, but like the
Right.
sexy young version
Mhm.
of the witch, and like that's how he gets duped. And so his lust is what got him. Um, and then, I mean, lying is lying what? Okay, wait. Now I think I need like a class in what all the sins are.
I mean, it's such an open-ended question because you have like the 7 deadly sins, but then you just have what is
Yeah.
considered a sin. I mean, you have the 10 commandments, and then you have things that are outside of the 10 commandments that are just considered a sin. So it's a wide variety of things. So I mean, you can absolutely
So
say lying is a sin, and that's in the bracket.
so the 7 deadly sins are pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, and sloth.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I read that. I did not pull that off the top of my head. If
I mean, so that can be in there. I mean, the lying of the father. I mean, they're trying to
but
kind of get more money, but it's also at the expense of, the family dynamic. But anyway, sorry, keep going.
Yeah. I mean, I guess is that also like pride? Like,
Oh yeah.
not willing to share that they actually do need help
Yeah.
because and also like the pride that got them to the situation that they're in the first place, like this conflict between them and their beliefs versus like the Puritan colony and him not willing to back down, and that essentially led them to be banished. And then Thomason also I think alludes to like not doing all of her chores, and like it was like soon after the youngest son disappears and is killed, she's by herself and she's like, oh god, like I want to repent, like I don't always do my chores on time, and like all these other things that she says. She has like this short piece where she's like praying, and so I guess
Yeah.
maybe that's like sloth in a way of
Yeah.
her, like her, at least like her feeling this degree of responsibility and guilt over what happened, and like maybe kind of believing that might be the reason why.
Yeah. Or just not kind of obeying her parents in a timely manner in general.
Mm-hmm.
Could be kind of a thing. Yeah, it is interesting because, and I think you mentioned this, Jamie, how kind of forward it is about belief and your faith and that kind of thing, and really kind of how toxic it can be. Because to think, for Thomason to think that her being lazy with her chores is something that could condemn her to hell is something that is so kind of outside of the box, but that's something that kind of drove all of their lives. And so
Yeah.
it's interesting, I guess, to also just see the juxtaposition of her giving up all of that to say, okay, I'm just going to join these witches because what I was doing before wasn't helping me in a sense.
I think that she's stuck. I think that she sticks to her guns, and by guns, I mean like her belief system as far as it will take her, to the point where she loses everything. Like her dedication to this belief system like is consistent even when her mom is like saying these things to her, and her dad is locking her in this weird shed with her 2 siblings, like all of this stuff. It's like she's still, like she's still holding to her beliefs, and it's only when like she loses everything, which I think is, thematic in biblical stories and like how do people lose their faith when like, Satan is able to take advantage of them. I'm making this up, but like this is what I assume.
Yeah. It's kind of like a reverse Job.
I
in
was
a
literally
sense.
about to say it reminds me of the
Right.
book of Job.
Yes.
And for those of you that don't know, when I was in Hebrew school, I took a book of
Yes.
Job Hebrew school class. And that's like the only thing that I remember. But I just remember being like, why are they? I mean, now this is like going down the wrong rabbit hole, but I'm just like, why? So you're telling me that like God and Satan are like placing a bet on this guy? Like that's fucked up. And then like you're just gonna ruin his life to show how devout he is. But then like who really wins?
Exactly.
So yeah. I agree with you. It's like,
mhm.
okay, well at that point, it's like you maintained your faith to the very end, but then it's like, okay, but now what? And she's kind of like, what's the point? I also think it's funny that like the promise, like Satan's promise is like, you could have, like beautiful clothing and jewelry
and travel the world.
Yeah.
Butter,
I'm like,
pretty
you had
dress.
me to travel the world. Do I ever have to renew my passport? I'll consider this book.
Sorry, Brian, what were you saying?
I don't want anything from anyone. Thank you.
Butter, pretty dress, live deliciously, and see the world.
Live deliciously, except you will get old and wrinkly and stuff, and then you have to capture babies so that you can.
But
that's all a part of the deal.
Which doesn't capture babies to get young again? Riddle me this, Nikisha. What witch doesn't?
Actually, that brings up a point. Do you know any kind of urban legend-y things about or any other stories associated with witches and babies?
Hocus pocus.
I mean, I know like there's a sense of always like eating a baby to be younger, like eating the young to be young. But I don't know. You're like the urban legend queen. I don't know if you knew something about that.
No, I'm honestly, my first thought was only hocus pocus. Like literally that was my first thought. And then my second thought is kind of connected to my recommendation. So I'm not going to mention it yet.
Okay, fantastic. Well, okay, and you just discussing that, Jamie, and then Brian, I do want you to ask the questions that you wanted to ask. Maybe I'm not connecting with this movie because it's so faith forward, and maybe that's just a little trigger for me, where I'm just like,
that's fair. I did give the trigger warning.
I mean, we did. Yes, it's a very toxic kind of mentality where I just kind of, no wonder all you guys are going through all this dumb shit, because the extremist of your belief system is causing all of this harm, and I have no pity for you. Maybe that's my own gripe with the movie. But anyway, sorry, Brian, do you have some questions?
Okay, well, this is what I think. I think so. They're excommunicated from the Puritan group for prideful conceit, or for just like a religious dispute where maybe he's so on one side and they're not as strict as he is or whatnot, that he ends up being kicked out. Okay, if you watch, I'm pretty sure I saw it this time, Thomason is the only person who looks back, symbolic of the fact that like she yearns for the certain thing. She yearns for that community, because in this movie, she's the only one who can remember their time in England when she was like, remember the apples there, remember the stained glass, all of that. So, and that's why the devil at the end offers her these like luxurious things, because he knows that like that's the thing that's going to get her and trigger her. However, I think that the themes in this obviously are sexuality, obviously are family, obviously are faith. I also think it's like community versus nature, like the protection of both and all of that. However, I think the actual incite. I think there are like two kind of inciting actions in this movie. The first one is them being kicked out. That more sets the scene. But I think the inciting action of the movie is Thomason's prayer. She is the only person in this movie who understands her sins, who can self-reflect and say what her sins are. And that scene, which is a little weird because they're always praying together or whatnot, but she's praying, and it's the straight on shot where, as Jamie mentioned, she's talking about the fact that like she didn't do her jobs, she could be better. You know, she's not good at taking care of her little brother and stuff like that, and chores. And so I think the devil in the woods and whoever hears this, and as we always talk about, the ghost in the house or the evil spirit, the demon, always goes after the weakest. And I think in that moment, Thomasin, as Jamie said, presents herself as the weakest. And at least whether we see her as the weakest doesn't matter, because if anything, we see her as the strongest in some ways because she has thoughts of her own. Because then you have the brother who is showing lust, as Jamie mentioned. And he lies for his dad, and his dad doesn't correct him because he's covering for him. The two twins have talked with the devil because they've heard Black Phillip speak to them. They saw the witch by the river. They even mention it outwardly. They fake. I want to know more what we think about the twins. I think they were faking like their all of the faint and all of that stuff for sure. The mother just is so torn up by, is so faithful to the father and yet so torn up by her child going missing, and this kind of starts everything. The kid goes missing, their crops have been dying. The devil's already been around and the witch have already been around putting these people into a hard situation, and then she's the first one to kind of break, and that's what that scene is, in my opinion. Because throughout this movie, Thomason's teasing of Mercy was based in guilt and her sin of losing the brother and like really hating that. Maybe the protection of the community helped them and they kept the evil forces at bay and they were all together. She ends up being the target. As the movie goes on, her clothing and her hair get looser and looser. She starts with a hat on, like her neck thing, whatever it is like really tight on her. And at the end, she has no clothes on, but like her hair gets looser throughout. So you see her kind of loosening up to that. I think that she doomed Caleb by going with him. I think that Caleb may have been fine if he went by himself, but her, as the person who's being hunted and targeted, going with her kind of allowed the presence to kind of harm Caleb. You know what I mean?
So do you think with that, sorry to interrupt, but with that statement, do you think that when the family planted their roots in that forest or wherever they were, that everything that happened was all because the devil was trying to get directly to Thomasin?
No.
Or do you think that the natural events just kind of led it to be that way?
I think that the devil and the evil was trying to get to the family, and Thomasin ended up being their way in because she was the first one to break and show weakness in her faith, or at least be able to show what her sins are, so that, or be self-reflective of her sins so that they could learn it and kind of go in through that way. Because the brother, for instance, when the brother dies, he spits up that apple. He's basically like regurgitating the lie that he did earlier on in the movie. Like the idea that that the apples was his idea. There's a chance that maybe the twins were the ones to bring it in because the twins were corrupted earlier because they saw the witch by the river. That's another option there. I think at the end when the father finally blames himself, he like allows himself to like be free of it, but also he's killed by the goat. I think it's also the statement that's made in the movie where she says like, you can't do anything. All you can do is chop wood or whatever it is, like that idea. And then he dies under the wood. Like, I think that like the idea that he can't provide for his family and he lies about the silver cup, And I think all the other stuff outside of it, like the blood in the goat and the egg that ends up being a chicken fetus, like I think all of that is just like signs of the devil, but also sets a tone as well. I think if I really thought harder, I could probably, like Jamie said, associate some of the sins in specifically with everybody, but
Yeah.
that's kind of the through line that I followed this time, and it seemed to line up for me. And then to address at the end, listen, Thomason has believed this one thing her entire life, and then she kills her mother. There's no going back. Like, there's no. She not only is she being like, she's being, told that she'll have always live deliciously. There's no going back. Like, she killed her mother. She watched her whole family die. She probably blames herself for a lot of it, if not directly, but indirectly. Like, what other choice does she have than to go to the dark side, essentially? But also it's this juxtaposition because she's free. Like, you can feel the weight lifted off of her shoulders at the end. And it's actually very pleasing for an audience in terms of like watching her just like be able to like make a choice for herself. However, she is, she is signing herself over to the devil. I also want to point out the shot of the book on the ground and the hoof and then the boot is a truly incredible cinematography and masterful direction. So that's kind of how I think of this movie and how I tie it all together. It's this idea of like, is the family stronger than is faith the most important thing? Is the family the most important thing? Were they too faithful to their faith and not like secure enough as a family unit because of all of their sins and not being able to be self-reflective? They had their own little community where the other community had been safer, and they were also always on the edge of the woods. And I think that is symbolic of the fact, like, they were always on the edge of spilling over into and being susceptible to evil. And what what is the saying, like, if the devil exists then God exists, or like so then like maybe their faith wasn't misplaced in some ways, but they were so inflexible about it that like it was so much easier to break through than having a little bit of give to keep out the demons. That's kind of how I look at it. I know I just rambled a little bit, but that's how I watched it this time through. And Jamie hit a lot of my points on it in terms of like the sin and stuff like that. But I just wanted to fill in the blanks with like how I watched it.
Yeah, that is interesting to think about. And even if you want to dive in deeper with the 7 deadly sins, I mean, there were originally 7 of them with the baby, including the baby. So
that's true. Baby's sloth. It doesn't do anything.
So lazy. Fantastic. Well, let's get into the meat and potatoes and brains of all of this with our segment, Brains. Tasty. Sorry, I think that's from like a Fergie song. It's like taste it.
Oh yeah,
but anyway,
Fergalicious stuff. Fergalicious stuff.
Fantastic.
Yeah, don't worry, I got you.
Thank you, Jamie. This is why we're in this together.
Can our producer put in
No.
her singing while she's doing the flips?
No. I will.
Or you could just leave me in.
Yeah,
that was me.
You did it already. I don't have to put it in.
I think I
I wish that y'all could have also seen Jamie's face while singing that. It was quite fantastic. TikTok worthy, I would say. But all the same, fantabulous. So let's get into some human behavior things, because I mean, we've already started the discussion about this, especially because it's so faith forward. But some of the things that I just want to kind of talk about that can be an open discussion for anyone who wants to chime in. I want to talk about the family isolating itself, so they were a part of this group, but they had some type of dispute to where they decided they would be better off on their own. And a question that I thought about is just the idea of growing up with one set of beliefs because you're not surrounded by other people who have other perspectives, other cultures. You're just in this one-minded type of situation. And my question is, how can that be damaging on one's outlook on life? Like how important is it to grow up with different opinions and cultures and perspectives? Because I mean, for this, the family didn't have anyone to lean on, so it was to their own detriment. But my question is, how do you feel about that, and what can be kind of the mental effects of isolation?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question, just especially because we've talked so much about like the importance of social supports. And so like, yes, the
Yeah.
family has, themselves, but I like when the movie is starting and they're learning that they're going to be banished because of conflicts and disputes in beliefs. It's already kind of setting this precedent of like, this is the only way of thinking about things, kind of like what you were alluding to, and like shutting off learning other experiences, learning about the world, learning new things. And how does that like rigid style of thinking, turn into something more insidious when it comes to like being closed-minded without connecting with others? Although I guess like the reality is they're not totally cut off from others, because the father is like, selling things to make enough
Right.
money to make ends meet. And but like, so it's almost like having their cake and eating it too, in a way. Again, it doesn't work out for them, but like, if this terrible demise had not befallen them, like what would be of this family? Because it's they were talking about also like sending Thomasin away to like
Right.
another family, or even like marry into another family. Like, how does that work if she is shut off from the world and like loses that social connection? And like same with the rest of the kids, like as they grow up, like what happens to them? What happens to the twins? How do they like, how do they interface with anyone other than each other? Because like it's clear that they
Right.
kind of feed off of each other. So
The
I feel
twins.
like I know they were the worst.
Truly
wait,
the
what
worst.
happened to them at the end again? I still don't remember.
Well, they just disappeared.
Like
Okay.
after the witch was suckling on the teat of the bloody goat, like Thomasin just wakes up in the morning and they're just not there. And I was like, good.
You're like, thank God. They were the worst.
They were the worst. She probably ate them as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
It's and I know this is a rabbit hole of a conversation, but I just have to mention, and then I'll ask my other question, that the idea, and Jamie, what you brought up with them sending away Thomasin because she needed to help a family or get married or whatever the case, it just brings me to the thought, also because I've been watching Bridgerton, and the thought of the women having to be married off and not having the ability to do anything on their own or learn things on their own. Even Thomasin says, I can't even write my MF name, like,
yeah.
And how did we get here as a society? Again, a discussion that is off to the side, but it just is reminiscent. And like you said, Jamie, how can that happen if you're not even in a social setting to be able to get married off? But even still, in Bridgerton-esque, you are in society, but then it's still a question of you're just marrying because we have familial duties that we have to fulfill. And that's all I'm going to say about that. But to the point of society, so they get the family gets cast out. And this can be kind of an open-ended question, but it just gave me the thought of how did we even get to the point as a society to be able to cast people out? And what is it about our individual mentalities that long so much to be included into select groups? Like, where do you think we even learned that aspect of wanting to be a part of something that is exclusive? Or, everyone wants to be a part of a particular group because of such and such or whatever, but with this, they're being excluded, and these people are not thinking twice about it. They're just excommunicating them, and what power do they have to just say, oh, you can't be a part of our society anymore? So I guess it's a more open-ended question, but really I just want your thoughts on how do you think we got to that point in society of excluding people, and what is it that makes us want to be a part of, select groups, be a part of the popular kids, like what is that? Where does that come from?
Well, I've never been a popular kid, so maybe Brian should.
Me either, so maybe we're just asking for a past life.
So I was not a popular kid. However, I think it's just human nature to want to be a part of something. Even people who say that they like being on the outside or whatnot, like they don't. I don't mean to generalize, but like people want to be a part of something, even if that thing is on the outside. Like humans are a collective being. Like they require socialization, which we can get into a whole thing about the past couple of years, but like just in general, like that's why theater exists. That's why cave paintings exist. People got together to storytell. That's what, religion is storytelling. Like regardless of what you believe or not believe, it is still stories that teach us right and wrong. Like we come together for those things. We are a social group of beings. And I think that people just want to be a part of something. The idea of exclusivity is that means I can be a part of something and it makes me more special. Like it's to me, that's like the fabric of human nature. Like, and I think that people treat it differently. I think that people treat it with respect. Some people treat it with, with an air of superiority, and I think that people are also crazy prideful, which we see in this movie, and they will stick with their guns no matter what, and they'd rather regret something later than admit it up front and be wrong. So I think that all of that plays into this movie specifically.
And I guess to your point, of just kind of wanting to be a part of something and being so prideful that they'll just admit that they're wrong later. It's kind of like that mob mentality. And we've discussed that, I believe, when we were talking about the new Halloween movie, when they were trying to go.
Well, Nikisha, as we all know, evil dies tonight. So,
oh God, it dies on this night. Yeah. And I guess, in thinking about modern day and how that's kind of transcended into social media, and cancel culture, and it's the mob mentality that kind of wins in some instances. General opinions, do you think that mentality is more detrimental, or is it something that could be positive, but we're not using it in a positive way? And I guess I'm just connecting kind of the mob mentality to how we use it today with social media and stuff. So just general opinions on that.
I think it's both.
Okay.
I think it has to be both. I think that it's good, it's bad. It just depends on how you use it. Like people have found long lost family on social media. People have found real community on social media. People have also, on the total flip side, been bullied and killed themselves. Like it is the most evil and it is the most good. Are we learning about other parts of the world that are in trouble and helping them through it? 100%. But what is the filter of that? Like how much of that is true? How much of it is not true? Like there's a lack of empathy. Somebody can text somebody anything and not have to see their physical reaction, so you have no reaction to that. I think it's both sides. I also think, going back to your question about about mob mentality and courage and stuff like that, I think that courage is not an individual. Simon Sinek, the kind of speaker, the leader, guru, talks about this. Like courage is a mob mentality, and you build courage because of the trust of other people. You know, you're it's harder to build up the courage. You have to be a certain type of person to build up the courage on your own. But like courage is much easier to come by if other people are going through it with you, are playing into your ego. And that could be good or bad. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. It could also be a very good thing, but I think courage is because of other people. Because you want to give something to somebody else. You want to provide something to somebody else. You want to prove something to somebody else. I think a very little of the time is it have to do with yourself. And I think that has a lot to do with, you know, mob mentality in this movie, in Evil Dies Tonight and Halloween Kills. That I buy into some of that theory, if that makes sense.
Okay. Well, even for in this particular movie, it doesn't really go so well, the kind of mob mentality of excluding this particular family. But also, you know, they had the devil after them, so there was no chance for them in the first place. So,
oh, right. The devil is the bad guy in this film.
Yes. not the mob mentality necessarily. It was just kind of like a catalyst, if you will.
Jamie, did you think something else about like mob mentality and stuff and social media?
No, I mean, I think that it's just like it's so easy. There's so many layers and like barriers where you can like you have access to other people that think like you, which is intentional. So like it's easy to feed into the mob mentality because like that's the point. Like that's why like software engineers are making $1 million to create these algorithms that are doing exactly that. It's incredibly valuable, but you know, it's like, how do you, I mean, I haven't like had these more kind of ethical conversations generally thinking about like, how do you kind of pair AI and like algorithms that are learning with like humanity and like, you know, where that can go horribly, horribly wrong. And like, as we see, you know, some not great things happening with social media, as Brian was talking about, like, how do we shift gears and like, and fix it while continuing to like grow and develop and like, and, you know, whose priority is that? Or is the priority making money and capitalism and so like then you're not necessarily resolving things that are like preventing the mob mentality from going. I mean, here's like a silly example, but like I think about Twitter and like how people use like Twitter polls all the time and timely because I guess the Oscars used Twitter to do like who they thought the fan favorite was, and all of the like Zack Snyder bros like took over the Twitter poll, and so like the Justice League won, which was nutty, and everyone's like, "Wait, what?" And like that's just like a dumb thing that it makes me think of, but like, you know, when you get a group of people together who like have very strong feelings about something to the point where they are like aggressively bullying a movie studio into like re-editing and releasing the film because like they thought that whatever they thought. It's like, but then like this giant company acquiesces to that. Like that's terrifying. Like this is the scary stuff. I mean, and again, and like we talked about similar stuff with Scream, and we talked about similar stuff with the most recent Halloween. It's like I think that this is becoming the bigger issue that we're seeing to the point where all like it is fucking scary, and that's why we're seeing it more and more in horror films, because it's like this reality that we're dealing with of like, you know, you have this degree of anonymity. Yeah. When you're using like through non-confrontational forms of communication like social media. And so you can hide behind your username or steal someone's identity and do insidious things, but like there's still this like barrier that's protecting you, and so you can like do what you want, and but yeah, like these are all the things that scare me about, you know, the internet and why I'm like in awe of it, but also like, oh, I should like remove myself from all of this.
It's definitely a two-way street. And thank you for going down this rabbit hole with me, guys. I mean, it is in relation to what we're talking about because you can just have the earliest account of mob mentality.
Thomason was tweeting the whole time in this film.
Exactly.
Right.
So, but truly, the earliest forms in history that we see of mob mentality are these witch trials. And someone just spouting out one thing and it getting around to everyone to where that's what the belief is. And people died because of that. And we're just seeing a different version of it now. But it's so interesting to have that kind of dynamic within this particular family in this movie, because that's what has happened to Thomason when she is being accused by the evil twins that we all hate. And it's interesting that even someone who gave birth to her and also lost 2 children is so quick to say that the cause of it is another child. And I think that's just kind of an interesting dynamic, which leads me to a question for you, Jamie, about just familial relationships. Because Thomason kills her mother only because her mother is trying to kill her. We talk about fight or flight a lot on this podcast. And of course, if someone is trying to kill you, if the only way for you to survive is for you to kill them, that is kind of your basic primal instinct, or you're trying to run away, whatever your fight, flight, freeze is. But for the most part, if that's your only way out, that's your only way out. So my question to you, Jamie, in a sense, do you think that a familial relationship in talking about fight or flight, can that change your kind of mental dynamic? Because this is your mother, but she still kind of went through with it because her mother was trying to kill her. Do you think that plays any part in how you do your flight or fight, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I mean, I'll say that like, kind of what we've talked about before of like fight or flight is this like response, like this biological response that's happening in your body. So like, the if there is a perpetrator that is trying to cause harm, like the like effort that it's taking your brain to be like, oh, I can't, like your body's not saying like, oh, I can't react in fight or flight because like this is a family member. Like your body is trying to, like the whole goal is that like there is a threat to your life and like you have to survive. And so like your body is going to do what it needs to do in order to survive. And I mean, I think the way that like this scene plays out is there is this moment of hesitation that like she doesn't want to do that. Like she has a sickle. She's like holding it. Yeah. And I think she slices her mom in the face to like deter her mom from continuing. And it doesn't. And there's like this hesitation that she has. And then finally she like gives in and kills her mom. And so it's like her brain in that moment was like trying to seemingly like figure out if there was any other way to stop her from like continuing to try to kill her. And it didn't seem like anything was going to stop her and she had to defend herself. So I think that like, there might be moments where you're able to have that awareness. It's so hard to say because again, like when these things are happening to our bodies, like it's not necessarily something that we have like the most awareness and consciousness over controlling. It's like how is our body reacting in a moment where there's like a life-threatening danger right here that we have to get away from or do something about? And I think that like, at least in this, film depiction, it's like trying to show like, okay, like how far do you need to be pushed in order to protect yourself? And like, what other, again, I think that's like the faith thing. It's like she held on to her faith for so long. It's until like the very last second where it's like, oh, she's literally going to kill me. I need to protect myself.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. So it is just, you really can't go against your primal instincts. And like you said, it's not like she immediately killed her mother. She gave kind of like a warning hit, and then nothing happened.
Yeah.
And then, continued on. But I think that's just so interesting because we would like to think that we would have the awareness to be protective of our family or the people that are close to us, no matter what. That also just kind of reminds me of any kind of zombie movie, when your family turns a member turns into a zombie, and you're like, okay, well, I love you, but you're about to kill me, and you're kind of also not yourself,
Yeah,
so
you're very
here's
much
that.
not yourself.
Because brains. So my last
brains.
question, brains.
Yum.
Right. Taste it. My last question for you, Jamie, has to deal with postpartum depression, which I believe we have talked about before, but I would love to just hear it again, what your definition of that is. And I'm asking this in regards to the mother giving birth to her baby, but then also losing her baby. It gets stolen by the witch. Can you just tell me about postpartum, and can you tell me your opinion on how she reacted to losing her child? Do you think that was a believable response from this trauma? Because we see her characteristics. She's held up in her room for a long amount of time. She's sitting and praying. She doesn't really seem like herself. And kind of every decision that has happened, she is still thinking back on, we shouldn't have been here. I would have still had my son, that kind of mentality. So if you can just go through those for me, please.
Yes, ma'am. So postpartum depression is essentially, the long short of it is like depression after childbirth. And so like what that can look like is, like sadness, irritability, feeling overwhelmed, crying, difficulty sleeping, not just because you have a newborn, but like because of the depression, mood swings, anxiety, things like that. And it can last for like weeks to a few months after delivery, and can be like very, very severe for some folks. I feel like there's this phrase like baby blues, which sounds like it's really minimizing of like what postpartum depression can look like.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, postpartum depression is implying something that like is more intense and lasts longer. And like can get, if it's interfering with your ability to like function and like take care of yourself, take care of your baby, things like that, then like that might be a sign that you might need support. And it's like a very normal and okay thing to get support for. And there's a lot of folks who specialize in pre and postpartum depression and anxiety. It's actually something that I'm like really interested in, like on my own to get certified in. But I'm at this point not an expert yet, but find it very interesting. In terms of what is going on here, I don't know if I would necessarily like flag it under postpartum depression. I feel like more of what she's experiencing like is grief. And like symptoms of grief, and like her like refusal to get out of bed and crying and all of that, I think is a very like realistic presentation of someone who like just lost their baby. And they reference that he's unbaptized, and I don't know at what point, I don't know like how many weeks or months Catholic babies or Christian babies get baptized. So like in terms of like falling within, I guess I was trying to figure out like timing wise, like how old the baby was, to see like, could she potentially fall under the postpartum depression, or like if she already had that, this would have like totally exacerbated those symptoms. But I think just generally that like the way that she's responding is like normal for somebody who's grieving.
Okay. Yeah, that's. I mean, we are all on this podcast do not have any children, so we
Nope.
can't speak on those things. But isn't there just a time though in general that a child is not supposed to even kind of be in the outside world with other people because I don't know, disease, I don't know, things going on in the air? Is that a thing, or am I just making it up? Like, you get your baby, you have your baby.
The stork delivers the baby.
Right. But don't they have to like kind of, stay still? Like, don't move.
Yeah, nobody
just stay here.
Move. Just look at the baby.
Just look at the baby. We're just going to feed the baby. Nobody come over. We don't want anything. And maybe I'm thinking more because of COVID times, especially people are held up a little bit longer because they don't want the outside world and germs to get a hold. But I don't know. It would seem like, because I don't know, babies are so fragile. But again, things that we don't know. Somebody tell us is there a time period for them to go out in the outside world to be exposed to all the germs and things, or is it not?
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? Fantabulous. That's all the questions that I have for this. A lot of human behavior things.
Wait, so
with this one.
So we talked through this, Nikisha. What do you think of the movie now that we've really kind of gotten into it a bit more?
I appreciate it more. I don't think I need to watch it again per se to get a different opinion about it. I appreciate what you guys have told me, your thoughts and such on the matter. And again, like I said, it wasn't a matter of me just completely dismissing the movie.
Sure.
I just felt like I was missing some bits and pieces of it. But I think my opinion of it definitely grew in a positive way with you guys speaking on it. I don't know if I would, recommend it to everyone, but it's for what it is and the conversations that we've had. I think it does its part, what it's supposed to, whatever we think it's supposed to, own interpretation type thing.
Cool.
But I'm glad we had this discussion. Fantabulous. So should we get into some ratings, some Rotten Tomatoes?
Yeah, let's do some Rotten Tomatoes.
So rotten.
It's the Rotten Tomatoes game.
All right.
So I accidentally saw the score, and the only reason is because I hate this, but on Amazon, I was watching this movie through the Showtime subscription, and it said 2020. And I was talking to a friend and I said, I don't think this movie came out in 2020. Maybe this is not the movie that I remember that I watched when I was in college. And so when I was looking it up again, I saw the Rotten Tomatoes and confirmed that it was a 2015 movie that I did indeed see before. So sorry, guys. I'm out the game.
All right, Jamie, what do you think it is?
I think 86.
It is a 90%.
Whoa.
Which is
very
super surprised by that.
Yes.
As thought-provoking as it is visually compelling, The Witch delivers a deeply unsettling exercise in slow-building horror that suggests great things for debuting writer-director Robert Eggers.
Oh, okay. Well,
next
we'll give it that.
Yeah, and next week we'll be watching his next movie, The Lighthouse. So get on that, and we'll compare and contrast, even though it's the same thing, comparing and contrasting.
It'll be a good time for sure.
Cool. Should we do the 4 S's?
Yes. Slithering S's. Let's do it.
Skull, scare, shakes, and suggestions. The Talking Horns 4 S's.
All right. The 4 S's are skulls, scares, shakes, and suggestions. Skulls. Let's start with skulls. 1 through 10, 10 being the sculliest, 1 being the least scully. in terms of human behavior and mental health, what do you think of this movie? Nikisha, why don't you go?
I mean, you know, I was talking to you guys before we started recording this, but there are some movies where it can just really kind of zone in on the skulls and we can talk about mental health and human behavior. And sometimes it doesn't. That doesn't mean it's a bad movie. It's just the discussion can, go either way. So I would give this a 2
All right.
on the skulls.
Jamie.
I'll give this a 4.
All right.
Because I think it does a pretty medium job.
Sure.
Medium.
I'm going to give it a 6 because I think the human behavior as isolated and faith works together. I found that very interesting, how they interact with each other, how they just couldn't be self-reflective about their sins, and how that kind of juxtaposed against what they believed, and they kind of were hiding it from themselves. And all of that was fascinating to me to watch this time. Scares.
Cool.
How scary is this movie? Jamie, why don't you go?
I'm gonna give this like a 2. I don't think it's like intense jump scary, but there's definitely some moments of tension and like a little bit of anxiety.
Sure. Nikisha?
Yeah. I'm going to give it a 2. There was one jump scare that got me, and I can't think of what it was right now, but I'll give it a 2 for that one jump scare.
Sure. I'll give it a 4. I remember there being one jump scare that got me again this time, but I think a lot of the tension is there for me. So I'll give it more of a 4. And shakes. How much are you gonna remember this movie? Can you shake it off? What are we doing there? Nikisha, let's go back to you.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 4 on shakes solely because of our conversation. I think that is what I will take away from this movie and keep with me.
Sure.
4.
Jamie?
I think I'll give it a 5. It's grown on me after the 0.2 viewing and the full first viewing and this viewing.
Cool. I'm going to give it a 7. I really enjoyed it this time. I would suggest, to me, this is not an always suggest to people movie. This is very much a like, oh, I know what you're into. I think you'll really enjoy The Witch. Or what, you might not, you might not like The Witch, but I think it's worth you seeing to have an opinion on, like that type of thing. But that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Nice
suggestions. Suggestions. Nikisha, do you want to go first? Jamie, do you want to go first?
Yeah. No, I'll go ahead and go. So this is a TV show, so if you like witchy witches and in Salem, then watch the TV show Salem. It's pretty good. First season was very nice. Or even the new Sabrina on Netflix, or the recent Sabrina on Netflix. So witchy witch vibes, and it's pretty scary. But for a movie, I watched this a while back, but it's a really nice surprise witch vibe. The Autopsy of Jane Doe.
Love that movie. I love that movie.
Yeah. They see it.
Jamie?
So I also went witchy, but in a different direction. My first suggestion is The Craft.
Sure.
Because
yes.
Honestly, if you haven't seen that movie, what are you doing?
Yes.
It's just so good. It's a must watch for all. And then my second is just The Witches, Roald Dahl.
Sure.
Oh, nice.
That movie. And I do mean like the OG one, not the weird remake that they unnecessarily made.
Yeah.
Man, I also like read the book. It's just like super unsettling and like definitely scared the crap out of me as a kid. So I hope it scares the crap out of you too.
Spicy.
Cool. Mine's a little bit different. I think you should watch The Crucible. If you like the witch trial stuff, if you like the idea of mob mentality and what people are saying about you, I think you can go with the Crucible. If you want something a little bit more kind of like witchy, something is like creeping in on you. We covered it on this one. I really like the Night House. It's not witchy as much as, but just the idea of isolation, and like something creeping in on you, taking advantage of you, without you knowing. I would go with that. So those are my two.
Fantastic. Well, I think that wraps up our episode of VVH. You can follow us on all of the social medias, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, at Talk Horror Pod, Pod. And Brian, where can they listen to us?
Sure, you can find us wherever you're listening to podcasts. So Stitcher, Spotify, and of course, Apple Podcasts. Rate and review us there. 5 stars, please.
And thank you.
And as we mentioned earlier in the episode, next week is the Lighthouse. So we're doing Robert Eggers movies. So make sure to watch the Lighthouse for next week with Batman and Green Goblin.
Yes, Batman. I still need to see that. Oh, so behind on anything superhero.
With Edward and Jesus.
Oh, that's even better.
Yeah.
Yes, Edward and Jesus. I would love for us to sign off with Jamie giving her best witchy witch noises, please, for the people.
Fergie.
Not Fergie. Your witch voice.
What's my witch voice?
I don't know. Give me a laugh. Give me a good laugh.
I don't know. I that wasn't very
Loved
good.
it.
I accept it. I love
double,
it.
Double,
it's great.
toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble.
Right. The play that shall not be named.
No,
Absolutely.
don't say it.
I'm not going to say it.
No, that's right.
Macbeth.